Hey there, retail tech enthusiasts. Welcome to the Rising Stars podcast, your go-to source for all things retail technology and the ever-evolving world of point of sale. I'm your host, Kate Orara, Partner Development Manager at Star Micronics, and I am thrilled to be your guide on this exciting journey. Here at Rising Stars, we're not just keeping up with the trends, we're setting them. We dive deep into the tech landscape with global industry leaders, unpacking strategies and discussing the latest innovations that shape the future of retail IT. Whether you're a tech aficionado, a business owner, or just curious about the dynamic world of retail, this podcast is your backstage pass to insider knowledge. And hey, it's not just about the tech, it's about the community. Join me and the Star Micronics team as we lead and innovate, shaping a brighter future for the retail, hospitality, and cannabis industries, as well as beyond. Together, we rise. So hit that subscribe button, stay in the loop, and let's make waves in the retail tech space. This is the Rising Stars podcast, where innovation meets inspiration. Let's rise together. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Rising Stars podcast. I'm your host, Kate Orara. So happy you're here today, and I'm really excited. I've got a really good friend of mine from the industry, Tyler Wells, who is the ISV and Strategic Partner Manager at MicroTouch. So he and I have known each other for a very long time. Tyler, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit. Tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about what you do at MicroTouch and a little bit about MicroTouch, if you could, please.
Absolutely. So, like you said, we've known each other for quite a few years, almost going on a decade, to when I was working at Nemo Monitors as their business development manager. So, been in the tech hardware piece of our business for quite a while. And at MicroTouch, I manage our ISVs and our strategic partners. So as we go to market with solutions, end users and resellers are always asking, hey, for a solution and not particular just a touchscreen. So we manage the partners, or I manage the partners, to build a solution through our reseller group that are vetted, have great customer service, and just build everyone's business that are working in the channel. And ISVs for hardware companies are integral piece of business growth and understanding the market. So they are a influential piece of our business to understand, and I'm proud to be working with them through a company like MicroTouch. So as those ISVs have just traditionally been in North America and Latin America, we're dealing with more self-service and QDS and POS in Europe and Africa, and it's getting exciting for us. So happy to be a part of this, and I've been at the MicroTouch team since their inception and since 3 years ago. So it's been a wild ride, and our prominence in the market has been a fun ride thus far.
Well, it's been fun to not only see their development, but your development, Tyler. I mean, you've been on the 40 under 40, now the 50 under 40. And I mean, you still haven't hit that 40 mark. Your girl's been there for a little while now. So I just to let you know, jump in the water's fine, but I know you got a little ways to go there.
Well, I appreciate that. That's because of the mentors and the partners that I've had throughout my business career. They've really set me in a position to succeed. And with resources like the RSPA and our partners, like, we're surrounded by great people that support and help our growth. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So the structure of this podcast, I'm going to kind of give you guys a heads up. Usually it's like an interview format. We're going to do these things a little differently. Tyler and I were very fortunate to be on a panel together during RSPA's Retail Now a couple of weeks ago, which was in Vegas. And so if you're listening to this way in the future, this is what kind of premised this, but it was a panel, and we were talking about, I think the title was generational selling was the title that was, and the idea was to give takeaways for resellers and software partners to leave with on how to work or how to sell to different generations. And It was, and just kind of a little split. If you were at the panel, you know. If you were not at the panel, you don't know. Tyra's smiling. It was one of the most passionate and active sessions, just sessions that I've ever been at any conference in my entire almost 19 years career in this channel. I don't know about you, Tyler, but it was very passionate.
Yes, very passionate, emotional.
And what we mean by that too is it wasn't the panelists, we did not get a chance to speak much. We were very we had prep calls and we were super excited about the topic. And we also had Craig Kalibi from BizTracker, who was, and we'll talk a little bit about the generations, but he was there as well. But the audience, they just started going. They just started asking questions. And then there was some banter. And what told me, and I know this is a little different than what Rising Stars podcast usually does, but what that told me is that this is a topic that is hot, that is concerning the channel. And we have so many different generations. This is how we preface how the panel started, is we have so many generations in the workforce at one time. And it's funny because Tyler and I are millennials. Like I said, I have broken the 40 mark, but Tyler's kind of on the younger end of the spectrum. So I'll let him, if you would like to share his age, that's up to him. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do any HR infractions, but we do represent even such different aspects of the millennial generation, because millennials are 1991 to 1996, and that's a lot of time in between. So you've got the different generations in the workforce. And so what I wanted to do is Tyler and I wanted to talk about some of the things that we wanted to cover during the panel that we didn't have a chance to. I don't know if you want to expand on any of that, or if I hit that on the nail on the head for the most part.
Well, it was great. It was a great opportunity to see what was really frustrating these clients, and the communication, the fraud, the different ways they like to communicate. So as impassioned as it was great feedback from us, because we could work that into our messaging to these guys. And when you can identify someone's true problem and solve that, that's where you get a lifelong customer or a friend out of the deal, is when you get on the path of helping them with a resolution. So, hopefully this will elaborate on some of those passionate speeches and conversations that were happening. So I'm looking forward to it.
So let's talk about the different generational characteristics. We've got, and it's funny too, because when I first joined the channel, was right after I graduated from Clemson in 2005. So yeah, I'm going on year 19 in the industry. And when I first joined, I was the newbie. I was I remember I didn't even understand. I was like, what are you talking about? Channel, like a channel on TV? Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like a whole, and then if I say channel on TV, my kids are like, what are you talking about? YouTube TV? It's all about streaming now, but so I was the newbie, and everybody, the majority of the those that were in the channel, probably I would say 60% of them were boomers, and maybe 40 or so of them, or no, 30 or so of them were Gen X.
Yeah.
So now we're starting to see the boomers are starting to retire now. They're getting to that retirement age.
Yeah, and I would like to point out in 2005, 7, around that, the channel is greatly different than it is now.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So you had a couple of key resellers, you had a couple of distributors, or you had more situational distributors. Now we're more pronounced. It's more streamlined. You know where to go for pro AV stuff or point of sale stuff. But you were probably making and cold calling a whole bunch of people in 2005, which I haven't been doing a whole bunch of cold calling.
Oh man, I got good at the cold calls too, man. I got used to, I tell people I have really thick skin. I've been told no a lot. And I mean, you get to the point where you're like, well, I remember telling my mom, she's like, what do you do? It's like, well, I cold call. And I didn't do it all the time. I would do a mixture of cold calling and calling existing partners. But my mom was just like, oh, and they hang up and was like, yeah, they hang up on me, and they sometimes I get choice words, but just move on to the next one on the list on the Excel spreadsheet. Just move on.
Anyone who has experience with cold call has thick skin because of it. Because
Yep.
I moved from Wyoming to New Jersey and I was calling 80 to 100 people every day for soccer tickets. And yeah, the verbiage and the reception I got was less than pleasant. But hey, I got used to knowing all of its flavors real quick in my career. So
Yep.
that doesn't scare me anymore.
So we've got the generational characteristics. So do you want to, I know you did a ton of research on this. We're talking about the boomers, the Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. So do you kind of want to expand on those a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand the breakdown and where they fall into because baby boomers, 1946 to 64, they value loyalty. They value face-to-face communication. They're more likely to do a deal via handshake or verbal agreement. So very old school, and communication has always been imperative with them. Now, the way they communicate is different across the board, but we'll just briefly go through the different demographics and then we'll
Mhm.
elaborate on that to
Okay.
more of the situation that we're familiar with. But then you have the Generation X that follow the baby boomers, and they're 65 to 1980, so right before us. And they're very independent, they're very pragmatic, they value work life balance. And they're also very communicative, but they're also bridging a gap of where technology helped their communication a little bit more. They adopted cell phones and internet and everything a little bit more. They were more favoritist than the baby boomers. And then the
Just a side note,
millennials.
my dad's a baby boomer, and he literally just got a cell phone. Like just got a cell phone. And it probably is within the threat of my mom. And he actually asked my kids if he could test the texting out with them because they could help him learn how to text. So I'm like, oh my
Hey,
gosh, you're
he's on to something there because my grandpa, I remember I taught him how to use Windows over the phone back in the day. And he'd be
Mhm.
like, oh, it started off with, hey, what's this little cursor thing on the screen? So now he edits and videos and he took it at well beyond, but there's something about the boomers wanting to talk to the kids to explain it to them because I think
Yeah.
they're on to something there.
Yeah. Go ahead. I apologize. It's just funny when you were saying that. It's like my dad's just adopting this, and we've had cell phones forever.
I mean,
No.
that he needs it for a specific reason, and he might learn to love it. Whereas millennials, 1981 to 1996, our demographic, we've never not had a cell phone.
Yep.
And then don't even get started on Gen Z, which is 97 to current, because they were born with a cell phone and an iPad and touch screens and all of the things that make communication easy, but they might not be the best communicators across the board. So that's why that conversation we have got so impassioned, because different age groups communicate different types of ways, and that was very evident in our round table panel that we were at.
Yeah, it's very when it comes to Gen Z, I mean, millennials, we experience landlines and then the transition to a cell phone and that being complete, the sole self that the cell phone is it. It's so funny. My kids don't even know what a landline is. I remember taking my daughter to a soccer tournament and she was like, the phone doesn't work. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, I'm making weird noise. And then I went and listened. I was like, that's called a dial tone. That means you can dial on the phone. And she just kind of looked at me. And I'm like, yeah, just never mind. Just go to the hotel room. But it's a
They have no
very,
idea.
it's so completely different. And I think that kind of goes into our next subject of like, our kind of some communication strategies, because how we communicate is going to be is important, and the preference for each generation and understanding what their preferences are for communication. So I don't know if you kind of want to, maybe let's start with maybe communication preferences.
Yeah, and I'm I would like to focus on the millennial and Generation Z since that's what I have the most experience in. But one thing to note with Generation X and baby boomers is they like face to face, they like on the phone from my experience.
Mhm.
And I we get it. There's a form of trust. You can read body language, you can do all of that. And in sales, we all know that's very important. The composure you have with this demographic is part of the sales strategy that you have, right?
Mhm.
Whereas millennials, they you deliver a product to millennials and you communicate, hey, you got it, and check in on them via text, or there's a lot of millennials that they're always on the go. They're a little bit more transient than the previous generation. So their technology matches that type of lifestyle. So they'll be texting from a phone or they'll be emails. They're a lot more mobile, and so, giving them a call might not be the most convenient, whereas a text, check in, if you're friends with them on social media, that's where, as the partnership and the development with your clients grow, you can be a little more intimate with your conversation and your communication strategy. I wouldn't necessarily, if you had a client that was a millennial, texting them right off the bat might not be the best move. But after you guys have been at RSPA, talked a little bit of business, have emailed. Well, then, hey, I had this question about this and send a text. Then I think you've built up that rapport that it's
Mhm.
not intrusive that, hey, this might be their effective way of communicating. And if they respond back in an email or some other form, then you kind of know what avenue that they want to be in.
Mhm.
But traditionally, the mobile aspect of Gen Zs and millennials cater to a little bit more lackadaisical communication structure, Slack, text, those messenger teams. I utilize those for short-term communication all the time.
Yeah. And far as well, when we craft the messages, like how do you, you know, based on, obviously trying to communicate to someone of a different generation, what kind of language or tone and content should be used for each of those generations, in your opinion?
Very important and very good question. So with the baby boomers and Gen Z, or Gen X, my apologies, I tend to simplify everything, make links abundantly clear. There's no misinterpretation for the message that I sent. Like it could be described as mansplaining, because I really want it to be easy to find. I want all of the information there. Whereas millennials, I'm a little bit more lax in my communication. I'm still outlining everything, but they're a little bit, they're viewing it off mobile and stuff like that. They might not be going to the links, or it's situational. But what my point is I'm definitely breaking it down and really closing the lines of communication with the two older demographics, whereas the two newer ones are a little bit more or less structured and open-ended, and there might be delays and stuff because that's just the communication standard that I've seen fit for those type of clients that are millennials. So definitely tone. Millennials don't necessarily, me included, like confrontation. And you definitely don't do confrontation over text or email. That's a phone call, in my opinion.
And you reach out to them and you say, hey, can we
Yeah,
connect at some point? I need to discuss something with you.
100%, because
Yeah.
we all know that text message, we need to talk. Well, you can't interpret the tone or
Usually comes a
where's
breakup
this.
after that or something
Yeah,
like
exactly. Like, hopefully, my
that.
client isn't texting me to break up with me on Friday. But that type of tone and that type of messaging is important. Hey, I'm not mad. I just didn't want to leave this up to interpretation through a mobile type of form of communication,
I mean, you could
which,
use emojis and stuff like that, that might help, but it's
yeah. But then again, it's like, is that sarcasm? Or I
yeah,
see that's where overthinking and open for interpretation with millennials and Gen Z.
right.
Little bit more lackadaisical. The baby boomers aren't texting me a smiley face, that's for sure.
No, they're not. They're not. And One of the things I also kind of want to touch on, and I think this will be a good conversation because I believe I'm such a relationship person. Like I know that we're friends and everybody that works with me understands that I want to get to know you as a person. I want to help your company, but I want to get to know you as a person because I also believe that helps to build trust. And so what I also have found just in my years, everybody values trust differently and sees it in a different light. So what can we do as sales professionals to build trust with each group? Like what are their values that they can get that trust from us?
Well, I think it's important to establish why people are untrustworthy in today's point. And at the conversation that we had, remember why no one picks up a phone call with a number they don't notice? And we put it out to
Mhm.
the crowd and we're like, why don't you guys pick up a phone call? And they go, oh, the amount of scammers and just junk that we get. Like, if they're important, they'll either leave a message or they'll call back.
Mhm.
It's very important. So, cold calling, as we kicked off this probably wouldn't work that well. It would work, but it wouldn't work as effectively as it did 10 years ago because that trust is eroded. Same with emails, same with how many phishing links do we get from our colleagues. So we're very, very adept at being very skeptical at incoming communications when they first originate, right? That's
Mhm.
why the RSPAs, that's why these events are so important because we establish a sense of rapport and trust with these
Mhm.
people firsthand that they can tell very quickly if we're authentic or not. So authenticity of the message and authenticity of the form of communication and establishing that trust is more than just an email or call at this point.
Yeah.
That's a couple of you have to touch a couple of different communication methods to build that trust. And then once you've developed that trust and succeeded in maintaining, establishing, and prolonging that trust, that's where you get the business and hey, introductions and I need favors and all those things that make us successful because we can't do it by ourselves. We need to rely on our partner's trust to get us into avenues that we otherwise would have very difficult way of getting into there.
So I want to go back. You talked about confrontation just a second ago. As millennials don't like confrontation. I would be willing, and you tell me if you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm okay with having a debate. I would almost dare say that Gen Z is even more less likely to want to deal with confrontation.
I would wholeheartedly support that statement.
Yeah.
And yeah, and why do you think that is?
All about that cell phone. It's people are able to kind of hide behind. I think Gen Z, and do not come at me. This is just I've got two teenagers, so this is what I see. They have their mobile devices and they're able to hide behind that. They're able to hide behind social media and just the highlight reels of things. And so when they're bothered by somebody, they can easily just ghost them. They can easily just, well, I don't like this girl, so I'm not going to text her back because I don't want her to think that but so I don't want to lead her on. But it's so I've noticed, and again, that's teenage drama. But I think even in the workplace too, how I think this is what's going to be important because I did a LinkedIn poll and I talked about this at the panel. So my LinkedIn poll, 44% of my network are millennials, 38% are Gen X. Baby boomers make up 11%, so that just proves they're they're retiring, they're getting out. Gen Z is at 6%. So if you're a Gen Z listening to this, that setting up a call with somebody to discuss a confrontation is going to be key. Talking to them and saying, "Hey, can we connect about something that's been bothering me, or there's a situation with your order that I'd like to talk about and talk it through with you," versus just a message. That alone, we're talking about building trust. I think that's going to be absolutely key to building trust is being able to have that the gumption to send that message. You're at least giving them a heads up, like, okay, this is not going to be a positive call, but I'm going to go in, hopefully the customer will go into it with some sort of open-mindedness, but at least still, they still trust you. You're like, okay, well, at least this person's being open and honest with me and vulnerable with me to tell me that there's a problem.
Yes, that's a great breakdown. And we're all going to have difficult conversations. And if you can set the proper expectations up, under promise, over deliver, we've all heard that, but
Mhm.
there's context to that. That's when you do have to break that conversation and that tough conversation with the client. Hey, eh, owning it is one, owning it with a self of confidence, and how are you going to fix it? They don't. Yeah, it's inconvenient, but ultimately, like, how they need the information on how they're going to fix it with their client, so you can offset that conversation, that awkward conversation, with, hey, we're being proactive. Hey, let's get some stuff in inventory next time so this doesn't happen, or let's forecast better. You
Mm.
can take those conversations and twirl it into building more trust with your client at the end. And I don't think, and let's face it, Gen Z's had some social situations as they grow
Oh
up
yeah.
at key points that eliminate the human interaction, which is so important for deducting what people's actual intent is. And I think that's very important to note that, yes, they have communication issues courtesy of technology and social media, but they've been exacerbated by some unpredictable
Yeah,
circumstances
we'll
as
go ahead and
well.
point out the elephant in the room. I mean, COVID was huge. I mean, I remember telling my children when it happened, I said, this is a historical event. You're going to remember this for the rest of your lives, and your children are going to sit down with you when they're in elementary school and they're learning about history, and they're like, hey, dad, hey, mom, tell me about COVID.
True story.
Yep, absolutely. So let's go into kind of the sales techniques side of things. So how, or as far as what aspects of a product or service should be emphasized to maybe appeal to each generation's priorities when it comes to a value proposition? Like, what are some ways that they can provide that information to a different for different generations?
You can take it case by case and study which age groups find the most important. But if you wanted just an overview of what all four demographics kind of hold to be an important aspect for their buying and trust building, is loyalty.
Mhm.
So if we're developing products and providing those products with a service, and you're going over and above to ensure that they're happy customers, you're going to be building that brand recognition and that loyalty with that client. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter, loyalty with Gen Zs and Millennials is a little bit different in terms of they have loyalty apps now and they're going to use that to pay. And this is dictating a lot of different things in our industry that they're picking up with mobile technology and payments specifically. With the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, that might be a little bit different. They're just gonna never buy from anybody else, and they're only gonna go to you when they have bids and stuff like that. So the loyalty aspect of all generations is where it's at. And let's face it, marketing is expensive, and it's very important to keep the customers that you have, because getting new ones, if they're moving to you, what are the chances that if you don't deliver, they're just going to move on to the next person or the next business? So that's where that trust and loyalty and communication breakdown is very important to understand on a client by client basis, because there's no just overarching framework that you can apply that makes you successful within all demographics all at once.
Well, you made a really good point. So you're talking about like you're going to get more than likely, excuse me, Gen X and baby boomers. Like loyalty is usually pretty solid as long as you're taking good care of them and not taking them off.
Yeah.
They'll usually stick around. But I mean, millennials and Gen Zs do research. They use the internet all the time. I know my husband, for instance, I keep giving all these real life examples, but I think they're so applicable. Every time we get our insurance, our car insurance and everything, we get that quote. He's calling all the different ones and getting quotes because he negotiates all the time. And I'm like, well, again, I'm more of like I'm a Zennial. I'm a Gen X or millennial. Like I'm really at that early time because I could probably cross for both. And I'm just like, why are you doing that? Be loyal. They've taken good care of us. And he's like, yeah, but they're loyal to me, then they're going to give me the best pricing. And so, I mean, that too is something that Gen Zs and millennials, they will use the tools. So you got to keep them loyal by making sure that you're constantly being competitive, I would think as well.
Yeah, and I mean, and think about the baby boomers and Generation X and the social aspects as they were growing up. Abundance was not a thing for them. So shopping, negotiating, going for price, uh, being more self-reliant, you see that a lot more in those age demographics because they grew up through wars. They had parents that were in the Great Depression. And if you've ever heard any stories about that, I mean, that alone kind of automatically helps you understand definitely a lot of baby boomers and how loyalty is very important to them. Whereas millennials and Gen Zs, they could float around and shop, but they won't call and cancel it. They'll just delete the app and then move on to something else because
Yep.
they'll avoid that confrontation. So
Yep.
it's situational.
Yeah.
But I do not blame him for shopping out insurance. That's a smart thing to do.
I think it's a guy thing. It's like, I think he gets a kick out of it. So, how about overcoming stereotypes? I think that this is something we tried to touch on too during the panel because there are some, I know like millennials and Gen Zs may look at Gen X and be like, oh, they're the old guys. They don't use technology, but Gen X uses technology a lot. Like they embrace it. So, how are ways that they can avoid those stereotypes and approach each customer just as an individual rather than a stereotype?
Yeah, stereotypes are definitely not good when applying this to new business because yeah, it's just not a good business practice to go in thinking that you know that this Gen Xer is just going to want to shake your hand and sign a contract and not use DocuSign or anything like that. The
Mm-hmm.
successful Gen Xers, especially in tech, they're they've if you ask them how long they've been in tech, they've been here a while. So you don't want to. The stereotype I would avoid is acting like they don't know what tech is.
Mm-hmm.
So not mansplaining it to them would probably be a good idea. But you mentioned the millennials and Gen Zs do all their research, and you're very right, and that's very good because they also grew up in a abundance uh, type of society where they've gotten a lot of products that do not add up to what they've wanted, right? They bought it, the marketing and everything has been good. And then there's, just because it looks good doesn't mean it is good. So there's another stereotype. So when approaching clients, you do it with authenticity. You if you can go in there with a, hey, I was thinking about you, or I have a client, if you can plug or approach them in a way that helps them out with either a product, with their service, with something, or how you can help them better their product or service, then that gives the impression that, hey, I'm not going in there with any intent to sell them. I'm going in there with the intent to help them. And ultimately, that's what we're doing. We're selling hardware and everything, but end users don't want to have to file RMAs. They want every peripheral they hook up to automatically work. That's what they want. So if you can deliver that and approach them in a way to help them achieve that, I
Mm-hmm.
think the authenticity is maintained.
And I think going back on the trust aspect and even that stereotype, like asking for feedback, be willing to improve. Like get the feedback from someone and just say, hey, what can is what's a better way for me to communicate with you? What's a better way for me to collaborate with you? I think that is super important as well. I think we all need to just be open-minded and understand that everybody's raised differently. Everybody has different values. I mean, and even how you're raised, it also depends on where you were raised. Like the
Oh
Southeast, I'm
yeah,
here in the Southeast in South Carolina. That's very different than the Northeast, or even you go into the West Coast. It's a completely different culture. That has nothing to do that you have a
absolutely.
different. I was even saying that's like there's a difference. You have difference in generations, but also um, demographics or geographic location can mold a person's values and communication style.
No doubt. And the United States is at least 8 or 9 different countries, like
Yeah.
united as one for sure.
Yep.
So there's culture is something we haven't hit on, but you're absolutely right. Culture has a significant impact on how you approach people, talk, mannerisms.
That's a whole nother
Just
podcast, probably.
that, yes, but the
You go to
social
I go to New York
dynamic of
City.
our business
Yeah,
is wild.
I
Yes.
go to New York City for NRF every year in January, and I'm like, people are so mean here. And then they probably look at me in some country South Carolina bumpkin, and they're like, "You're stupid." Like we down
Hey,
here we insult you, but we just say bless your heart ahead of time. So we make sure it sounds nice before we hurt your feelings.
hey, don't mess with New Yorkers. They got somewhere to be, and if you take them off their path, they're late for the entire rest of their day. So, having lived there,
Absolutely,
I understand it a little bit, but they are pretty mean.
absolutely. So you mentioned loyalty programs and appealing across generations. I think that's something too, is making sure your company, and I think we did get to talk about this a little bit during the panel, but offering accessibility and transparency. Like I think I mentioned that Star, we have a partner portal. So if anybody is in our Empower Partner program, they have access to a portal. And in that portal, they can search for products, they can download data sheets, they can get images, they can register opportunities, they can see the status of their opportunity, they can see um, just about everything except stock at distribution, but they can see past orders, like they can see
Yeah,
everything in our partner portal. And I think that, so I don't know if you have any experiences with that, or personalized marketing campaigns that you've done with certain partners that have been successful, or how we've been able, if that how I don't know if you want to expand on that as well, but I know that that's been something too, that again, building that loyalty and giving that trust is giving them something like, here, you can see everything right here. It's here. If you want to find it, it's at your disposal, however you want to use it.
that's beautiful. And accessibility to information is very important for our clients. And when I first started off in the industry, I knew who Star was almost immediately. We had the same partners and everything, but we knew what you guys were bringing to the table and the products that you were bringing to the table. So you guys had a reputation of, hey, we've been here a long time, our products are quality, go to market in these very strategic places, correct?
Mhm.
So when I was watching that, I've worked for 2 companies where it's been grassroots type of startup type mentalities where marketing budgets isn't abundant, so you have to make do with what you have, correct? So one of the things that I've always loved being a hardware manufacturer is building a sense of community within your reseller group or end user, just the people using your product. If you keep them happy and you answer their questions, they're more likely to advocate on your behalf. And if you can get a knowledge base where people are interacting and answering technical questions amongst themselves instead of every time they have a question, ask our customer support team. Our customer support team loves those questions, so fire away. But
Mhm.
if you're letting your clients develop and advocate on your behalf to other people, that is building the trust on your behalf with very, very limited marketing resources from yourself. How you stoke that fire is you give them developmental data or hey, I noticed you had this question. We developed a patch for this, or you can take that level of customer service with, again, it doesn't cost very much to answer questions and help your client succeed. That once that happens, and hopefully your success is parallel to that, the success of your customers, then as you grow, your brand awareness grows, and then it eclipses all demographics because they're all helping each other out on your forum. So that's what I've seen. But yeah, just being aware, building solutions, having a customer support that addresses end users and resellers' requests and feedback, very important for building industry trust, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to, I think the last segment that I kind of wanted to get into are kind of the future trends and cross generational retail. So obviously we were talking about talking with the end users, but now it's like, okay, the retailers are talking to the different end users and how they are working with all the different generations in their aspects. So maybe some of the upcoming technologies that might further bridge those generational gaps. I don't know if you want to expand on those, like AI or VR, AR, e-commerce.
I love our industry for the new technology and how resellers and AV integrators are adopting it. And one of the things that I've loved is that especially baby boomers and Gen X would appreciate, but I appreciate as well, is VR and augmented reality and artificial intelligence. Those are the key buzzwords right now. But AI, for example, they're plugging in World War II videos, and they're colorizing them and cleaning them up so it almost feels as though you're there. And so I can only imagine what baby boomers and Gen Xers are looking at and like, holy cow, like it's real to them a
Hmm.
decade, a thousand years, 100 years after the fact. It's
Hmm.
bringing so people are adopting that to make ordering more easy. People are adopting these ways to make surgery, education in surgery with VR is huge. So you don't have to work on a life patient. You can do it in the VR, get your comfortability, and then go to the next step. So these key or buzzwords are bridging the communication gaps because people are using them effectively, but they're teaching and educating and allowing us to view scenarios much differently than we were 5, 8, 10 years ago. And the level of interaction that comes with that are just scraped just scraping the surface. People really don't know how to implement them effectively right now, but you and I can both see with our clients and in the industry, that's that latency isn't going to happen for long
Right.
because they people are adopting it, but they'll come into their own in the next year or two that people are going to really be blown away. And I'm really looking forward to those days.
I mean, AI, that it was, oh gosh, there was so much AI at NRF. Like it looked like AI threw up all over the Javits Center. And I think that there was so much hesitancy, and I mean, it's been around a lot longer than what it's not, it didn't just start, but the thing is it's starting to gain traction in the workplace and on day to day. Even just me personally, like if I want to send a text message to my daughter's soccer coach, and I'm like, okay, I want to tell him he's a jerk, but I can't tell him he's a jerk because he'll bench my kid. So what's a great way for me to communicate this in a way that sounds researched, prepared, and professional? And I can use Chat GPT and all that stuff to give me that information. Um, and I think that there's so much hesitancy. Everybody, and yes, it does open a whole nother can of worms of cybersecurity. It does. There is a cyber threat because people are using AI to tap into companies. So that's, you do have to be careful what you share in it. Um, but again, that's where I think boomers and Gen Xers are the most hesitant to use it because they're like, oh my gosh, it could, I don't want it to, like, tinfoil hat, like, oh my gosh, is it gonna destroy my life, or will I never have a job again? It's like, well, no, we still need people to do things but it's a tool. It is literally a tool, and if you use it right, it's really pretty pretty awesome.
It's definitely awesome for mundane and programming, Excel spreadsheet. There is a use for AI across the board.
Mm,
But then you go back to the baby boomers and Gen X, and then you go to recent statistics on the demographics that are most likely to get fraud over phone or
yeah.
email. And then it's like, so now there's an AI that can replicate my grandchild's voice, and someone's going to call me from a number that looks like my grandkids, and
Mm.
they're going to ask for a thousand. So it's getting sophisticated to where no one's educating these demographics on how to combat it. So they're like, okay, we're just not going to implement it. We're not going to even touch it. I don't want a cell phone because then no one can call me. So they've avoided it like the plague, and I don't blame them. On the same time, it could really help them out with their sleep schedule or their health or with work or
Oh,
it,
yeah.
there's tools that are out there that can automate so many parts of our lives that could free us up to do what we do best. Uh, yeah, I don't want to be making meetings all the time. I'll let AI do that or take notes or what have you. There's so many useful tools, but AI is definitely the buzzword right now.
Yep. So what are some generational attitudes, or how are generational attitudes toward technology evolving? And what does that mean for maybe some future sales strategies when we're working with some of these different partners, in your opinion?
Yeah, so technology is not stopping. And with quick service restaurant kiosk, that's a huge dynamic of a lot of businesses right now that's really exceeding right expectations, and you have to adopt that. There's businesses that have other issues from an operations perspective that this kiosk is solving, so people have to adopt that. Hey, I'm not going to be talking to a uh, you know, someone to take my order anymore. I have to do it myself. Or they pull up to an AI drive-through and they have problems with it at the beginning. Well, they also don't understand that drive-through may have some AI technology services that if they speak in Spanish, it will translate to the order taker that doesn't speak Spanish. So it's now multilingual and breaking that gap. So you're going to have to adopt the technology because businesses are forcing it upon us, because of the operations and the efficiency of those operations. It's just us as hardware companies. We
Mhm.
have to educate the channel and we have to make efforts to educate end users and give them resources to better adopt this technology and ensure that the solutions we're deploying together are safe, and there's no way that someone can take their credit card via the NFC payment terminal, or it's our jobs to alleviate those concerns for greater technology adoption, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I full heartedly agree. I think that you're absolutely right. It's not Technology is not slowing down. If anything, it's gaining speed. And it's crazy where we're at now. And I know even just 3 years from now, it's going to evolve. There's going to be a whole new buzzword. Like obviously AI is the thing right now, and it's going in 2 or 3 years from now.
Quantum computing.
What was that?
Quantum computing.
I'm screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when I retire when that comes about.
Yeah, I'll be
I'm
like,
out.
I'm stick a fork in me. I think I'm done. Well, I think that we've could go on for a long time and I think this was a good discussion. I think we touched on some of the things that we were kind of wanted to during the panel, but again, there was some, again, passionate views, and I hope that we have help give some sort of guidance on this. But is there anything that maybe you think that you want to cover that I didn't talk about?
No, I think we did a great job of covering and really addressing some of the key issues or key conversation points that we took away from the audience at that panel. It
Yeah,
was really good.
awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for watching or listening to the podcast. Be sure to subscribe either to our YouTube channel or to your favorite audio podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I can't remember all of them. There's so many, but your favorite streaming platform. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, make a comment. Um, Let us know if there's anything that we didn't cover on this that you wish that we did, or I would love to have Tyler on for a part two, whether we
Absolutely.
discuss this
Thank
or
you.
something else. So,
Yes. Well, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a pleasure being your friend all these years as well.
of course, friends forever.
Friends forever.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Rising Stars podcast. A huge thanks to our incredible listeners for tuning in and to our phenomenal guests for sharing their insights. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, leave us a review. Let us know what you want to hear more about. Give us your feedback because it fuels our journey to bring you the best in retail technology. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and behind-the-scenes content. As we sign off, remember the future of retail technology is in our hands, and together, we're shaping it. Keep innovating, keep rising, and until next time, this is Kate Orara signing off. Together, we rise.